You're listening to EMF. A-N. Welcome to the official podcast for the EMF Action Network. My name is Mark Keither, your host and publisher, and this is podcast number 3. The EMF Action Network is an organization dedicated to providing discussion on topics concerning the overgrown spread of wireless technology in our lives and how it affects our well-being. Each show features different guests and is distributed primarily through podcasts on iTunes and YouTube. Each podcast presents different guests who present their point of view and stories concerning the exorbitant expansion of wireless technology in our culture. Topics include electromagnetic hypersensitivity, mobile or cellular phone dangers, Wi-Fi usage, smart meter concerns, cell tower hazards, health concerns on EMF or microwave radiation, and more. On our show today, we will be speaking with Dr. Gunnar Heuser. Dr. Heuser is a practicing physician of international reputation. He has co-authored several books and written numerous scientific papers and abstracts. He has been an invited speaker all over the United States, as well as Europe, South America, and Australia. Dr. Heuser has designed an objective, standardized testing protocol to document EMF-related injuries. Dr. Heuser uses his experience, as much as possible, to inform the public and his colleagues of the potentially devastating effects of environmental and electromagnetic exposure. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to this program Dr. Gunnar Heuser. I guess, my first question would be, having a career as long as you've had, what was it that first got you interested or started getting you working on issues related to EM radiation or electromagnetic sensitivity?
Yeah, the answer to that is that for years, I was interested in what small amounts of chemicals do to people. And there is such a thing as multiple chemical sensitivity, which refers to patients who get sick from very small amounts of chemicals. And that interested me years ago, and I saw more and more patients. As a matter of fact, I've seen probably several thousand of those patients with chemical sensitivity. And I was interested in documenting that it really does exist, that it's not just purely psychological. So I published a number of papers in the field. And these are peer-reviewed papers, meaning, they are not just papers, they are peer-reviewed in good journals. And then what happened is I decided to retire because I'm an elderly gentleman. And patients wouldn't let me retire because now I saw some patients who, and this started about 5 years ago or so, I saw patients who, yes, they had problems with chemical sensitivity, but now they had problems with electromagnetic fields, meaning they said, Dr. Heuser, it's funny, I can't use a cell phone anymore, I get headaches. Or I now live or work by a cell phone tower and it seems to make me sick. Why? Because when I go away and escape the area, I get better. And when I get back into the area with a cell phone tower, I get worse. So I found that highly interesting and decided to get involved in that kind of field. And then I had a personal experience some time ago. I had a hip replacement. And the hip replacement went real well, and I had a good doctor and all that. But then over the incision, where the doctor had, made an incision on that side, on that hip, I got an irritation. It started to become red and irritated and painful. And so I showed it to the doctor, and he said, oh, you must have an infection. So he gave me an antibiotic. I took the antibiotic, but it didn't get better. And then I realized that I was carrying my cell phone at the time in my left hip pocket, which was right on top of where the incision was. So I took the cell phone out, and the thing cleared up and healed. So I've had a personal experience with what cell phones can do, although I'm not really sensitive to my knowledge to those frequencies.
That's very interesting. Especially just having the cell phone with you. It was not in use. It was just on, but not in use at that point.
Yeah, I just carry it in my left hip pocket. And of course, now you see, I know more about it all, and I know, for instance, that women should not carry their cell phone in their bra, because there are certain bras now that have pockets in them, and you can put the cell phone there if you're into exercising and all that. And there are now women who have developed breast cancer on the side where that pocket is and where the cell phone is being kept. And then there are other areas of interest. For instance, you should not, and I advise all my lady patients, not to wear a bra that is wired. Why? Because the wiring can kind of, you might say, invite fields, electromagnetic fields to come in. And so a wired bra is more likely to give you breast cancer if you wear it long enough. In other words, cancer doesn't happen overnight. Cancer happens after years of exposure. But it does happen.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience to that with wearing glasses. Because for a while I was wearing glasses that were made of metal, but in an effort to reduce my exposure and my own symptoms, I switched to glasses that were entirely made of non-metal, of plastic, and that did give me some improvement.
Yeah. So the same is true, for instance, of dental appliances. So if you have dental appliances which are made of metal, like retainers and such, you see that concentrates electromagnetic fields and probably is not a good idea to have for too long. And the problem, is of course also brain tumors, because there is very good evidence now, having come mostly from Scandinavia, there's very good evidence that long-term use of cell phones, if pressed against the ear, will cause will cause cancer of the brain in the area where the cell phone is being used. So if you put your cell phone against your ear and you do that for long-term exposure, then it's supposed to do it on the left, then you may get cancer of the brain on the left. And one of the publications that was made some time ago, and I believe paid by the industry, showed that after 1 year of using a cell phone on whatever side of the brain, that there would be no cancer developing. And they just used the experiment for too short. In other words, you need years before cancer develops. But it does develop. That's the problem.
You mentioned Scandinavia. I was wondering if there's any particular country, specifically that is maybe leading the way in terms of the research and the effort to better expose or better produce results in terms of the research that would show that this is potentially a worldwide problem that needs to be better addressed.
Yes, I think the Scandinavians are, in a sense, ahead of us and have published and are working in the field of what electromagnetic field exposure can do. So a number of publications has appeared, for instance, regarding brain tumors and brain cancer and others. So one would want to become aware of what the Scandinavians do, because they are, I think, quite ahead of us. They have found ways of doing research where our funding is very limited. It is almost impossible to get funding for research on electromagnetic fields.
One of our previous guests, Liz Barris, who was on our program a couple shows ago, mentioned that her goal is to be able to prove electromagnetic hypersensitivity in a court of law. And I think she was telling me that's when she was seeking you out for assistance on that. Can you talk a little bit about what both of you are doing in that regard?
Yes, I am not a neurologist, but most of my publications have to do with the brain. And I have access to doing what is called MRI, which are studies of the brain by an MRI method. And the MRI looks at the brain, among other things, very carefully and shows a lot of detail. Now, the MRI people have developed a procedure by which they do what is called a functional MRI. And the regular MRI just looks anatomy, like do you or do you not have a tumor, do you or do you not have a cyst, things like that. The functional MRI looks at the function of the brain at the time it is being done. And I had access, and still do, to having functional MRIs done on my patients, and I think by now I have about 7 patients. And they all have sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. They all had functional MRIs, and all functional MRIs were abnormal. And not only that, abnormality was kind of shared, meaning they have similar abnormalities. And to me, that is exciting because it proves that these patients have a real problem. And the documentation that Liz is talking about is that, you can't just go to court or not even to a scientific meeting and say, oh, I have a patient who claims that I have such and such, and not have any proof. So we need documentation. And in this case, the documentation would be a functional MRI. And if you have enough patients to show that they have not only sensitivity by history, but they also have problems which are shared, for instance, in a functional MRI, then you're getting somewhere. And that is kind of the goal, because so many people who are sensitive to small amounts of chemicals and people who are sensitive to electromagnetic fields, some people, they are just claimed to be crazy. And even doctors have gotten into trouble claiming that there's such a thing. So it's important that we document with objective tests which are accepted by the scientific community, that we prove with those tests that patients with sensitivity have a real problem, meaning they have real abnormalities which you can show and document.
How about, for a person who is first, discovering, that they do have EHS or electrosensitivity, someone who realizes that might be sensitive to something like Wi-Fi in a building or other types of wireless radiation, cordless phones, that sort of thing. Are there any sort of major or significant resources that exist for a person to be able to, get any kind of support or assistance if it's not, currently a recognized condition?
One would ask that question to Liz.
Yeah.
I, being a physician, can assist patients in documenting that they have a problem. So, for instance, if a patient comes to me and convinces me that they have a problem, I might do some tests. For instance, a functional MRI. And if that is abnormal, especially the way others have been abnormal, then I can write a strong letter and say this patient came to me, had complaints which are consistent with what we know about electromagnetic field exposure. Not only that, also had abnormal documented tests, such as a functional MRI. And then I would be prepared to, number one, write a letter for that patient and would go to court for that patient. But I would need documentation, to assist me.
Right, yes. In regards to, kind of similar to getting this discovered and proven in a court of law, there's also the issue of it hopefully some point in the near future it being recognized by the American Disabilities Act. Is that something that could happen in conjunction with this being proven in the courts, or is that something kind of separate from that?
No, I think that would be part and parcel of the same need to document. And documentation is very important, and I'm working on this. I have been to court many times for patients who have been damaged by chemical exposure. And so I'm familiar with the court system and how to prove things. You cannot prove anything by just saying that patient says they are sick. You have to show more. Now, the problem is that if I am the one who finds it and even publishes it, the other side will say, oh, Dr. Heuser, you're the only one, and we need it repeated somewhere else. And that's what you need. Once I have my data published in a peer-reviewed journal, the next step would be for another facility and another doctor to get some patients together and do the same thing. And then it becomes more and more evidence, you might say. And that is the kind of thing you need in court.
In regards to the World Health Organization classifying wireless radiation as a Class 2B carcinogen, does that give some weight or evidence to help prove it in court as well?
Yes, but you see, I'm not working on it being a carcinogen. I'm working on being a, you might say, neurotoxic, meaning being toxic to the brain. And so it wouldn't necessarily apply to that. But on the other hand, yes, we want to document that in certain cases, in certain people, exposure to even small electromagnetic fields can be damaging, and that damage can be proved. And not only that, it can be a long-term problem. And I usually use the example of a head injury. If you have a head injury, that lasts only so many seconds. And yet there are patients with head injuries who from then on deteriorate and become sick. So a short-term exposure can give you long-term effects. The issues are, there's a lot more to talk about, the symptoms that people develop, the similarity between chemical and electromagnetic field exposure. It's interesting because chemical exposure gives you, for instance, headaches and disorientation and memory problems. Electromagnetic field exposure can give you headaches and can give you disorientation and memory problems. So there are a lot of similarities, and this is very interesting to talk about. Other things happen too, if you use a cell phone and put it close to your reproductive organs, they have shown that your sperm count decreases. So there are many other systems which are affected, the immune system also, and the mechanisms of this whole problem can be discussed. So you need more time to discuss it more, to explore it more, and to make increase in understanding. I have a website which shows some of what I've done, and that's emfdoc.com.
Okay, again, that's emfdoc.com. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was taking a look at your website before we started the program here, and I noticed that you have spent some significant time in Canada as well. Is there any significant research going on in Canada right now as you're doing here in the United States that might be paralleling what Liz and yourself are trying to do here?
Yes, there's some research in Canada, not a lot. And of course, there's not really a lot in these United States either. But yes, Canada has some research in the eastern provinces, in Ontario and such.
Right. I'm familiar with Dr. Magda Havas, who is in Ontario, and I know she's doing quite a bit of work in regards to awareness of this issue as well.
Yes, and I was thinking of her when you asked me.
Okay, yeah, of course. Is there anything in particular that for people that are unaware of the issues that dealing with electrosensitivity? Is there any aside from just avoidance? Are there any other ways of helping someone who has that type of problem to avoid experiencing the reactions or symptoms that come with it, other than just true avoidance?
No, I think avoidance is still the best way to go. I'm working, and maybe other people are also working on how you can prevent. Can you take any medication to prevent effects? Can you do anything nutritionally to prevent effects? And I think all that is very new. So at this time, the only thing we can do is to avoid. The problem is that avoidance is harder and harder. So, there are cell phone towers all over the place now. And so if you were sensitive to what comes out of cell phone towers, it's very hard to find a place where there are no cell phone towers. So eventually we will not be able to avoid, we will have to find a way of preventing damage with whatever we do. Now, one thing is as famous in the field, at least, is what is called a Faraday cage, Faraday, I believe it is. And way back when, people discovered that if they put an animal or a person into such a cage, which is wiring all around you. In other words, you have a cage, you just have every wall and everything covered with kind of chicken wire. And if you do that, then the electromagnetic field cannot enter. So I have patients who try to do that, for instance, in their bedroom, and they go into one of these cages that they construct, and they feel that they're protected while they're in that cage. And then the question is, can you do such a thing as a safe building? And there are people who work on that. They say, okay, if you had, let's say, $1 million, we can construct for you a home where you are totally protected because outside electromagnetic fields cannot enter. So people are working on that.
Yes, yeah. In regards to protecting people, one thing I think about time and time again, is in particular children and schools and their exposure to these electromagnetic fields, especially from Wi-Fi and all the additional sources we have now in the last couple of decades. Again, what I hear time and again is that children are much more susceptible because of they have less development in terms of maybe their skull development, et cetera, is what I keep hearing. Is that true, that gives them more exposure?
Yeah, there is very good evidence, scientific evidence, that is that children's brains are more susceptible to electromagnetic field radiation. And as a matter of fact, it's very worrisome because I have two grandchildren who are 5 and 6 years old, and they have an iPad. And they use the iPad for entertainment. They use the iPad to get educated. And they spend hours a day with an iPad. And the question is, what does that do to their brain development? You see, so I think that is a very serious issue potentially, because whatever the iPads do is a long-term thing. It won't show for a year or 2 or 3. It may show later than that. And how are we going to assess that scientifically? So it's very difficult, but yes, children are far more exposed now. And in schools too, you have Wi-Fi in schools. And what will that do? And the question is, what are we going to measure? After a while, we won't even know what's normal anymore. You see, for instance, right now, the brain scan, my brain scans that I get on my patients are abnormal. And luckily, they have that facility has done 60 or 70 normal people, meaning they are not on drugs, they have no complaints, they're in good health, they have no diseases, and that is now the normal MRI, functional MRI. And there will come a time when we will have trouble finding normals anymore. Non-exposed, not exposed to chemicals, not exposed to cell phone tower frequencies, etc.
Any theories as to, with such a change in the increase of EM radiation, why these important studies haven't been done before or are being overlooked?
I think one reason is that the industry is unwilling to finance studies, because the studies may show that whatever they do is damaging. So you cannot get money to study electromagnetic field exposure in good scientific ways. For instance, what I do is not funded by anybody. I haven't even tried to get funding. I just get my patients to say, look, you have exposure, you're sick from the exposure, and we want to document it, and you have to find the money to document it. Now, some of my patients have found that money, but the industry, for instance, or the insurance industry, is not even willing to pay for functional MRIs. They call that experimental. And I struggled last year for a long time trying to get some of these functional MRIs paid for by the insurance companies, and they all turned it down and said, oh no, this is experimental, we are not going to pay for that. So you're really up a creek trying to fund that kind of study. But they should be done. But you see, the Scandinavians apparently have found that kind of money more easily than we have here.
Yes, and I think last I checked, Sweden is the only country that actually recognizes electromagnetic sensitivity as an actual impairment.
Yes, they do. You're right.
Right. Okay. Good. Well, it's been about half an hour here, and that's pretty much how long all my other interviews go. We've talked here about a lot of good material. Is there anything else though that you want to talk about at this point?
No, but I would be available to you if you wanted me in the future, because there is, as I say, so much to talk about yet.
Oh,
for
yes.
instance, the symptoms people get. How are they affected? Headache is just one, and there are other aspects and the symptoms, and how. Anyway, it's a long story, and therefore more time should be spent, and I will be glad to make that available.
Great. We'll definitely be back at some point to talk more in the future, and we hope to do a lot more of these. We call them podcasts on this show, where people can learn from a variety of people, about what these issues are, and hopefully bring some more awareness to the general population at large about what EHS sufferers are dealing with, and what needs to be done, not just for them, but for all of us to minimize our exposure and live healthier lives.
Yeah. Mark, I'm very grateful that you're interested in this field, and I hope you will continue to be interested and support us in finding out more.
All right, great. Well, Dr. Heuser, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll be in touch again, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
All right, bye now. You can find out more about our program by going to the EMF Action Network Facebook page. You can also find more about our shows on the EMF Action Network channel on YouTube. Please keep watching for more podcasts to be posted soon, and may your shadow fall on pleasant places. Have a great day.